And now we are approaching the last panel discussion of today's defense track at the Warsaw Security Forum. The topic is unmanned aerial vehicle and the future of combat aviation. Are manned fighters obsolete? And to moderate this discussion, we welcome to the floor Tomasz, Smura, member of the board of the Casimir Pulaski Foundation. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Hello, welcome everybody to the last panel of today's discussion within the framework of defense track of Warsaw Security Forum. Because we've got only, I see, 15 minutes of this panel, so I will skip the introductory remarks and the introduction of our distinguished panelists, and I will start directly from the questions. So my first question comes to General Philip Breedlove, who is, of course, former Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, and first of all, F-16 pilot. So, General, in the war following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Russian Air Force has been not able to win and maintain air domination over the Ukraine, also thanks to capable Ukrainian air-to-ground air defense capabilities. But on the other hand, we see how effective can be armed UAVs against hostile logistic, deeply behind enemy lines. So does it all mean that the era of the manned jets at end and the future belongs to UAVs, or it's too far to say that, General?
Well, a short answer and then a little bit of an explanation. The future of UAVs is bright, but the end of manned flight is not anytime in the near future. First of all, let's congratulate the Ukrainian Air Force, a much smaller force and a much ostensibly less capable force, has been managed extremely well, and they have been very good at masking their capabilities and where they are, and they really have basically thwarted all Russian efforts to establish air superiority. That's also important to your question about UAVs. And that is that the UAV currently is really only flown primarily in low-threat environments. Yes, nations are developing UAVs that are beginning to have stealth capabilities and working in high-threat environments. But the big employment of UAVs in Nagorno-Karabakh, in Ukraine and other places have largely been in low-defended areas, and that has allowed them. In the future, UAVs will have to become much more capable at penetrating a high-threat environment to really be relevant on the battlefield.
Okay, thank you, General. My second question comes to our Ukrainian guest who just came from Ukraine with the first-hand experience from the front. So, observing situation on the ground, how do you assess the effectiveness of UAVs, but also other kinds of Western origin weapon, and what kind of capabilities the Ukrainian armed forces lacks in terms of UAVs and other defense equipment, and how, as a transatlantic community, we can help you to win this war?
Thank you. First of all, it's my pleasure to be here. And I was listening carefully to all the defense track today. And it will be my pleasure, and I think that's very obvious invitation every time you hear from Mr. Zelensky, our president, to come to Ukraine and to understand what does it mean to see by your own eyes, not from the books, what does it mean, the conventional war. Because in the previous panel, we heard a discussion about the armed vehicles with armor capabilities to be effective on the battlefield. But you have to understand that each of the weapon it's not the past, it's only on the future. And UAVs is only the component, I would say, yes, a bright component, but nevertheless, you will never win without the infantry, without the special operation forces, or without the air forces, and so on and so on. For sure, on the very first days of the large-scale invasion and war, especially for our SOF, UAVs were the eyes, and that's how we actually managed to have some success on some battlefield position. And even now, they are using them as I would say, as a cars. You know, you never know what time electronic warfare will lay them down, or what capabilities on this or that position Russian forces have in order to put it down. But what I want to say that, going back to your question about the drones, UAVs from our allies and partners, we are lack of, I would say, striking UAVs. That's the very fast first our need. And if you want to see, and we want to see more Moscow's warships in a sea, or any other targets, high-value targets, that's the how UAVs as a component works in the whole operation. Again, what we have now, but we are lack of that. That's about Bayraktars, and that's, of course, what we are expecting. Maybe one day we'll see Predators from US in using our Ukrainian armed forces. But of course, I cannot mention about the kamikaze drones. That's the Switchblade 300 or 600 or Phoenix Ghost, and I want to mention what now Russians are using, especially during the last 2-3 weeks with the kamikaze drones named Shahid or Mohammed, if not mistaken. And that's what they're doing with the nightmares in Mykolaiv and in Odessa. And unfortunately, in some of them, or even in Russian UAVs, especially in Orlan, what we see, that's our partners did component details. And that's the question for our allies and partners, how we can find inside that UAVs our partners' details and components. That's a big question, unfortunately, till now. So I would say that the main attention and stress, what we are asking, that's about striking UAVs. But two more things. That's about anti-drone system. I cannot mention Lithuania and American strengths and working on that field, but we are now using and will use, expecting from the American side Titan system to our battlefield. We're expecting them to receive. And of course, electronic warfare systems, because in order to be more effective in working with from the Russian side of their UAVs. Because Orlan, that's, I would say, what I saw and what I managed to see during the work on the battlefield and visiting soldiers, like couple of minutes, and you will for sure get the shell or they will hit the position. Orlans, that one of the main Russian eyes on the battlefield, and their quantity, I would say, that's endless or enormous. I don't know. And yes, this component is very effective from their side, but from others as well. And of course, the main value targets and positions and headquarters, what we found on the battlefield, it was thanks to UAVs.
Thank you very much. Let me focus for the while on more industrial part of our discussion, which is me to Małgorzata, who was governmental plenipotentiary for UAVs in Poland. So Małgorzata, there is very few countries over the world which are able to produce like manned fighters or advanced transport aircrafts. But it's a little bit different when it comes to UAVs. So what country of the middle size, like this in Central and Eastern Europe, can do to join this family of leading producers of UAVs, both for military purposes, but also for the civilian ones? Małgorzata.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the previous notes about drones. I will speak from more industrial side, of course, and from let's say the public policy, because it's my specialism and my experience. I would like to bring you to the future, and we can imagine that in 10 years we'll see army of drones, and also in the on the civil side we'll see a new dimension of economy built on drones. Unmanned traffic is developing very fast. So we should look from the. My proposal is not to look from the bottom up, because now we are looking at the drone ecosystem bottom up, and we see what's happening and the Ukrainian experiences are very significant, because there is action and reaction. But now, looking on what's going on in Ukraine and elsewhere, what, for example, European Commission is doing in terms of introducing drones into the economy, we have some very important lessons to learn. And I think that I think it's a very complex issue. My opinion is that the new dimension of economy, and of course there are some common places, some common points in this. It's the usage of the airspace, of the lower airspace especially. The upper airspace is a different issue, but the lower airspace, which will be utilized by military, by civil aviation, and also by special forces, by internal affairs entities. It's something that will be in a common use, and how the airspace will be organized in the future, how the traffic will be managed in the common airspace is something that leads us to the point that we should focus on the traffic management for the future, because of course during the war military and in general military has a priority, but when will be a peace, it will be obvious that the airspace will be common and will be used by different stakeholders. That's the first. So traffic management system. This is definitely the topic that is being developed nowadays very fast. And for example, in Poland, we have some good experiences in unmanned traffic management system. And Poland is the first country probably in the world that introduced unmanned traffic certified traffic management system for drones in 2020. And I think also that it's important to see the variety of drones that will be in usage in the future. It will be not, we look at drones as on gun, but it will be also, of course, the transport of people, transport of cargo transport, and surveillance, and many other issues. So we should divide drones on cargo and robots that will collect data, will process data. So we should keep in mind that the variety of platforms will appear in the future. And so the lesson learned from what's going on in Ukraine, I think it's very important to keep in mind that it's something that is very fast developing and I think it's the last call probably for the government to look on the drone ecosystem from the top and to design the roadmap for development of all unmanned traffic, unmanned ecosystem in the future. So for the future, for establishing the capacities in Poland and elsewhere, it's important to have a roadmap for development, and also to establish a flagship projects. So to establish a flagship projects programs between companies, between probably states, and the last probably but not least, what is important? This is a very new dimension, and we need capacity for testing and for certification. So what I would recommend to organize the future drone ecosystem correctly is to think about these capabilities, this capacity. So testing and certification. We need new standards, we need the roadmap, and we need the place and standards for the future. Because drones are not only gun, but it's a dual-use technology. So this issue should be discussed and concerned.
So Małgorzata, simple question. So as a point, we are ready for the future. We are ready to introduce these UAVs, or it's a long way, to go ahead?
Well, from the infrastructure perspective, I think we are very close. We are ready. We are flying, at least, for civil, especially in civil. But yes, I think we are well prepared, but we can be withheld by so now thinking about the future and strategic planning for the future in these capabilities is important.
Let's come back to the military dimension of our discussion. General Wiśniewski, we discussed like 2 panels ago, the point as a military, as a center of gravity when it comes to military powers in Central and Eastern Europe. It's the same about aviation. We've got quite a strong fleet of jets. We wanted to procure some more. So as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we decided to increase defense spending. Minister Błaszczak mentioned it this morning. But what is our general strategy when it comes to Air Force? So what are our plans of developments of Air Force in the near future, but in the longer perspective, like decades ahead?
Thank you very much for having me here. Thank you, distinguished panelists. So first of all, the Polish Air Force, of course, has 2 different approaches. One leg is about the planned procurement, and we are doing this for years and for years to come. And the second is urgent procurement, which is connected with the war on our border. I have to start with the information that we need the resources actually to modernize our military, our Air Force. So the good news that Poland meets the NATO objectives, 42% of our GDP per military for years. This year is 2.5. The next year will be 3% of our GDP. It means that we have resources which can be allocated to modernize our Air Force. But speaking about the programs which are already in place, of course, the purchase of the F-35, the purchase of Patriot program. By the way, this time in one of the town in the northern part of Poland, the Patriot system make the final assemble and will be ready at the end of this year. So that's important information. But I mentioned about the Patriot system because the part of the air and missile defense, which the Polish Air Force is responsible for, and having the Patriot in Poland with IBCS system, and in the future F-35, makes our system, our command and control system, very effective. As you probably know, the IBCS introduction means that we can put our sensors to the system and feed with the information about the possible target. But at the same time, this system can accept the new effectors as well. And I hope that today, or maybe Deputy Prime Minister Błaszczak signed up the contract for a NAREW program, which bring more effectors to the system. And IBCS, there will be the fire control system, which can take information and spread out among our effectors. And I'm very happy about that the F-35 can be additional source of the information for the IBCS in the future. And talking about some kind of the pre-plan procurement, we have to talk about the UAVs, the TB2. And I'm not going to talk about that. We see the pictures and the movies from Ukraine, so we see how effective the system is for ISR and for strike purposes. But I think that in Poland, that this TB2 is just the first system which will be introduced. By the way, Polish operator conducted the training in Turkey, and we'll get this system in Poland at the end of this year. But this is the only one layer of ISR and strike capabilities. As you probably know, the Deputy Prime Minister Błaszczak made a decision to buy the Gladius system, which is two different UAVs working together. But what is really important for me is that this is the combination of the new kinetic capabilities which will be introduced in our artillery regiment. So it means that loitering munition will be weapon on choice for the commander of the artillery unit. It's a brand new idea, and believe me, there is no TTPs in the world how to use the artillery missile strike and the loitering ammunition in the same artillery unit to meet the objectives of the higher commanders. So we're going to work on the TTPs, but I think that this is a brand new idea. And talking about the Gladius system, I like it just because they are very small birds. We see the pictures from Ukraine about how vulnerable the Orlan 10 system is and how many of them is shut down by the Ukraine GBAT system. It means that we have to make a choice during the wartime when we operate in A2AD bubble. So we have to have a very small UAVs, very capable but very small, like loitering munition or maybe Fly-Eye, which is provided to Ukraine.
And very effective.
Yeah, we're happy about that. We have in our military as well. Or we have to move to the stealth technology in UAVs, which allow them to penetrate A2AD bubble. But that's the future. Talking about the future procurement as well, we have a loyal wingman program in Poland. I know that the loyal wingman is not sexy. It's a man-on-man teaming concept. Loyal wingman belongs to Boeing, I believe. That's why it's not sexy anymore. But in Poland, in our plans, we have resources allocated to loyal wingman program. And we very carefully watch what's going on in the different air forces. We know the Australian Air Force is a leading force with integration. But we see what the U.S. Air Force is doing right now. Air Force Lab, very successful R&D program. I believe it's concluded. But what we think in Poland, we're looking for a loyal wingman for our F-35. So this loyal wingman should get attributes of the 5th-gen fighter. The U.S. Air Force made a decision recently to allocate money for a future loyal wingman, which will accompany to next-generation air dominance fighter. And that's the future. We'll look very closely for these capabilities. So I would say that yes, we introduce a lot of USVs to the Polish Air Force. We want to integrate this, and there is a couple of the systems which can accept the information or provide the kill chain, the decision to kill for the loitering munition or the strike UAVs.
Thank you, General. It's good to hear that we have some plans, like long-standing for the future when it comes to our Air Force development. I would like to open up to the audience our discussion, so please prepare your questions. But before that, I would like to come back to General Breedlove, and maybe General Wiśniewski would like to engage in the discussion as well, because we discussed in the backstage with General Breedlove his observation concerning the air operation over the Ukraine. So as I mentioned before, the Russian Air Force, regardless of the quantity advantage, quality is under the question mark, but the quantity advantage failed to surpass Ukrainian air defense. And Ukrainians, according to the Department of Defense assessment, still possess significant percentage of the both fixed wings and rotary wings the aircraft fleets. So how Ukrainians did it? What's your observation? And what can we learn from Ukrainians as a NATO and especially frontline states here in Central Eastern Europe? General.
So I think we have to discuss a positive and a negative. The positive is that a smaller and ostensibly less capable Air Force was led very well and caused Russia to have a lot of problems with targeting. As you know, in the early days of the conflict, Russia fired many hundreds of missiles. A lot of those missiles hit empty targets because Ukraine had moved their air defenses around, and Russia was targeting old data and shot at nothing, literally, many of their missiles. And so these decisions, enabled to a certain degree by Western intelligence that helped Ukraine out, these maneuvers that the Ukrainian Air Force did to confuse Russian targeting were very successful. And I would also say the Ukrainian Air Force, while much smaller in number of fixed-wing aircraft, was also well led in that they were using their aircraft against appropriate targets, and they were, as we call, husbanding and not wasting their aircraft in places where they knew they would not perform well. So I would just say the Air Force was well led and the Western nations helped them. But we must also have a negative, and that is that Russia demonstrated that it had lost skill sets that we thought it had. We use the term SEED, suppression of enemy air defenses. We assumed that Russia still had this skill to do that mission. And if they had, they have lost it because they have not demonstrated the ability to track, fix, target, and destroy Ukrainian surface-to-air missile sites. This is a skill set that Western Air Forces, especially the U.S. Air Force, practice every day, all day in certain wings with specialized kit that is designed for attacking surface-to-air missiles. Remember the rumors before Desert Storm 1, the Super MES, the Super Missile Engagement Zone over Baghdad. Everyone said that it would take months, if not over a year, to penetrate the Super MES. It took about 2.5 days, and the Super MES was down because we work at being able to do this. And so the positive, the Ukrainian Air Force was well led, and they did a magnificent job of posing problems for Russia. The negative, Russia was unable to affect SEED and therefore was not able to take advantage of the airspace over much of Ukraine.
Thank you, General. So intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, training and practice, it's your lesson learned. What about General Wiśniewski? What's your observation from the Ukraine?
First of all, I would like to congratulate the Ukrainian Air Force for how they doing, and actually they succeed operation. And I think that one of the most important mission for the Air Force is to create effective air defense system, and Ukrainian Air Force were very successful. But I would like to mention about a few words about the Russians' performance as well. So first of all, I'm surprised that they didn't implement their own doctrine to gain air superiority as a target, as objectives. The second, we witnessed the lack of well-trained pilots and operators. And the third, what is obvious, they don't have a precision weapon system which can be employed to gain the air superiority and meet the objectives. If you look at the pictures from the airports or airfields attacked by the Russians, there is a 107 or 110 precise attack. The rest of the missile missed. If you compare what the NATO forces is doing, there's a 10 of 10 exactly on a DMPI designated by our targeting or weaponering folks. So that's a big difference. And I would like to mention about one thing, just we see the pictures about low-level flying, the jets and the helicopters trying to do the CAS mission or support their own troops. It's a very difficult mission. It's hard to fly low-level formation, have a situation awareness, use the electronic countermeasure, radars, and other stuff, be on a target, and put the bombs on the proper DMPI, believe me. So this is the worst for the pilots. And for sure we can see this, that the Russians cannot reach their objectives just flying low-level and doing the attacks with loitering or just far from the targets. And on the other hand, this is very difficult for the pilots because you are exposed for the manpads. And that's why we see the Su-25, Su-34 and 35 shut down by the manpads. We are not trained to do this as a modern air forces. We would like to gain superiority, be high, see a lot, put the bombs on the proper target, talk with our JTAC, and be effective as a fighter pilots. If we're flying low, it's very difficult. It's workable, but very difficult, and we are vulnerable from the system like manpads. they can be everywhere. Every mountain, every valley, there will be a few of them just waiting for you to show off, and they can shoot against you. If you start defensive maneuver, you are losing the track to the target, and you cannot put the bombs on time. So I'm really surprised that the Russians didn't implement their own doctrine, and that's probably why we can say that Ukrainian Air Force is so successful before they prevent Russians to implement the doctrine. Thank you.
And if I could just add to that, I agree with everything. And the Russians, once again, because they could not knock down the SAMs, the relatively few SAMs in comparison that Ukraine had, they were forced out of the medium and high altitude bombing, as the general has described. And now they're in an environment they have not practiced in. And if you remember, during the 80s, 70s and 80s, we all were flying low because we didn't think we could penetrate the Warsaw Pact's SAM belts. But we practiced again all day, every day at flying low, and it was still very hard to do. But when you make this change in the middle of the war and you haven't trained for flying low, it gets incredibly hard to do. It's more dangerous, and you are absolutely inaccurate with your bombing from those kind of attacks.
Thanks, General. For the end, let me ask more general questions to our Ukrainian guest and Małgorzata as well. So, against the background of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, also the Polish-Ukrainian relation became excellent. So, but I mean the political dimension of the relations. But in my opinion, our technology and industrial cooperation should also follow suit. So what does a government of Poland, the government of Ukraine, can do, you know, to enhance and develop our relations and research and developments and industrial dimension as well?
So first of all, I think that we have to lead the example between negotiations between Ukraine and, for example, Turkey. As we have now, we will see the new industrial point for Bayraktars in Ukraine. And even though it's a bit challenging, or I would say not a bit, it's challenging, but I think the same we have to go as deep and as much with the Poland side. Why not? Or vice versa. You have to see what's going on our battlefield and to provide this or to build or to produce as soon as it's possible in Poland, because the question is, I think, to all of us. No one, that's my personal view while listening to the first couple hours of the defense track. I think in Europe, everybody is relying on the Article number 5, and that's why treating Russia as the enemy, but still not believing that Russia can attack Baltic or Poland borders with Ukraine or whatever. And that's why, yes, the Eastern flank understands 100% what can be done by Russia here. But the rest of Europe is a bit, I would say, relaxed. And we have to, I think we have to be, you have to be prepared 100%. Not like 50-50, you know, maybe it's about only Ukraine, that's a gray zone, that's a battlefield only 1,200 kilometers of the active front line, and so on and so on. No, the quantity of the even infantry, then armed vehicles, then drones, it will be less than Russia has now. That's very challenging for all of us, not only for Ukraine. We understand that the quantity of the Russian troops and army, like more than 1 million plus new mobilized people, and no one can say now how many of them they will involve into army. We are just saying here the partial mobilization, but like we can see it like in a month for 1,002,000 of people, new people in Russian troops, and we have to understand that we need resources to fight with them, and it's not enough for Ukrainians. It's not enough. So that's why, and I'm more than convinced that the victory and any results of the war will be found only on the battlefield, and that's the war between the artillery, UAVs, the quantity of that, because the intensity And the less quantity on our battlefield showed the results. Yes, we are now very happy about our counteroffensive operation, but we are keeping silence about Donetsk region, about Bakhmut, or about other regions. We are happy now about Kharkiv, but still, I would say that October, November, December will be very crucial for Ukraine and for Europe as well, because of the crisis you have, and because of they will for sure start to hit the critical infrastructure, and then probably start to attack. Even despite the mood during the autumn and winter times, it's very low. So going back to your question. We have to use as much possibilities as we can. Building building in Ukraine, whether in Poland, but fast. We have to learn lessons very fast. No time to be just prepared. And please be serious with the Suwalki corridor, with the Belarus, and so on and so on. That's for us. That's not a joke, because almost nobody believed about the 24th of February. So, and the same thing can happen, unfortunately, to our close neighbors and friends.
Małgorzata?
I think in Poland we are aware of this risk. Well, just moving back to potential cooperation between Poland and Ukraine, I think it's a very, maybe not the word is not good, but very good example of opportunity, let's say, to build joint capabilities based on, I mean the UAVs. I want to mention that many pilots flying in Ukraine were trained in Poland before the war. We observed a huge amount of new pilots being trained in Poland. Because in Poland we had 100 drone schools, so training centers for civil pilots. So I think it's very important to continue this and to train people. We have in Poland we have 100,000 pilots of drones. These are statistics. They are different, of course, pilot. But we will need and we need in civil aviation as well, in civil drone aviation, we need very highly skilled pilots for drones. We lack these capabilities. So I think that training, and again training. And experiences of Ukraine, and I know that you have testing center next to Kiev. I think the testing center that Ukraine is organized, I think is the place to watch, because there they will gather all experiences and all lessons for the future. And I think it's also excellent opportunity for us in Poland to build joint capabilities for the future, because future will surprise us for sure. We cannot expect a lot, but yeah. And also, I think both Poland and Ukraine has excellent capabilities in aviation. I think we should revise and we should look what we do have in Poland and Ukraine, and to think about joint cooperation, about designing, about producing, and about fast moves.
Thank you, Małgorzata. As I announced before, I'd like to open the floor to the audience. I see many hands. There's anybody with mics? Gentleman in the first row.
Wojciech Łuczak, I'm defense analyst from Warsaw, Poland. Let me be honest. We have listened to the let's say painting of the situation, the picture of the situation in the over the Ukraine during the war, and the deficiencies of Russian operations are quite absolutely obvious. And my first question is that this is the picture, but what are the behind of the Russians such an effective way of using the air forces? General, please answer this question. And another issue, I'm going to put under the consideration the issue of the attacking swarms of the intelligent UAVs. Are we prepared, or because in the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and we have the first attempts to use the swarms, 3, 5, but not 100 or 300, something like that. How do you think, would it be materialize such a very bad black picture of Ukraine right now? This is another question. Thank you very much.
Maybe let's collect one more question. I saw, yeah, gentleman in the third row. And after that.
Thank you. Jakub Knop from University of Warsaw. So in light of blunders of Russian Air Force in Ukraine, I wanted to ask, what does the future hold for the attack helicopters? And the second very quick question is, are you aware of what's going on with the Su-57, the 5th gen Russian fighter, and how could the Western sanctions impact the development of this platform? Thank you.
And I saw the lady.
Hello everyone, Yana Avanesyan, European Academy of Diplomacy alumna from Armenia. My question will be continuation of the first question. During this discussion we were speaking about the good or positive things of UAVs, like fighting against aggression, but like more than 6 years, Azerbaijan uses UAVs not only in Nagorno-Karabakh but also in Armenia, and I am an obvious witness of the using UAVs not only for the military purposes but also for non-distinctive and deliberate attacks on civilian objects. So with the everyday developments of manned fighters, do we prepared for it, and what we do to put it in legal limitations in accordance with international humanitarian law? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We've got like a little bit more than 5 minutes, so please be short, but nevertheless, we've got a nice bunch of questions, so it's a difficult job, but you're great intellectuals. General Breedlove, maybe over to you.
So I think that we answered a lot of your question earlier in our remarks, and that is that the performance of the Russians was diminished because they were unable to accomplish tasks we thought they could accomplish. And as the general mission mentioned, their skill of their pilots is low because the flying time of their pilots is very low. And so for all of those reasons, they were unable to accomplish tasks that Western air forces consider absolutely essential to fighting in the air. And while we congratulated the Ukrainian Air Force, and we should, there's also problems. If you remember when the entire, almost 40% of the Russian army was stuck in the mud and along these roads on the north side of Kyiv, if a Western Air Force had been able to attack that target, we would have eliminated 40% of the army that we're fighting now, and the complexion of this entire war would be different because none of those Russian forces would have made it out of there. Think of the highway of death out of Kuwait in the first war when you have unrestricted air power turned loose on a vulnerable land force. It would have changed the nature of the war. So while the Ukrainian Air Force did wonderfully, we still have a long way to go to help the Ukrainian Air Force train to be able to properly support the ground, which, although aviators don't like to say it, that's our real job. Establish air superiority, then support the ground forces, and that we have to work on. I would like to just make a short comment on 5th generation Russian capabilities. Do you know how long it takes to train, to be able to perform stealth capabilities? In our Air Force, we have a joke. How long does it take to train a pilot with 30 years experience in stealth capability? It takes 30 years to train a pilot with 30 years in stealth capability. And so the point of the matter is, Russia will try to build a 5th generation aircraft. They have really no experience in high-end stealth. They have no capability of building their own chips now. This is the problem we're finding with lots of the technology they're bringing to this fight, is they don't have the chips to build capability. So we have to respect it. We have to think that in the future they will come to a capability, but I'm not terribly concerned right now about Russia building 5th or 6th generation capability. That's my personal opinion.
Solomiia, maybe yes for us.
I just want to say about the limitation, about the last question, about the limitation for any UAVs. Because you're from Armenia, probably, and people who are here took any part in any kind of war. War doesn't have any rules, and it means that no limitation work almost for Russian Federation. That's 100%. So we can talk this endless, but unfortunately it just doesn't work, even if you put this limitation 100%. And I think UN presence and UN existing, it shows it 100%.
Małgorzata?
Well, I just want to add, because it came to my mind. I think we should remember that drones are also it's systems it's cybersecurity, which will be the key issue in the future. So something that we should keep in mind.
And General, please conclude our discussion.
Okay, let me answer the question. First of all, about the Russian Air Force performance, this is a classified response. I cannot talk about that. And there is unclassified. And you get probably the unclassified answer from the General Breedlove. When we talk, but I would like to tell everybody about the kill chain and about what the Air Force has to do to be successful. So we have to, we have to detect, fix, track, target, engage, and evaluate or assess. The Russian Air Force are not able to do all these steps, and that's the partial response. Attack helicopters, yes. Deputy Prime Minister Błaszczak sent LOR for 96 Apache helicopters. We are in negotiation phase. They will be introduced sooner or later, depends on the lead time for a delivery, what the Boeing can do for us, but it's in place waiting for the answer. And yeah, that's pretty much what I had. Thank you.
I see General Breedlove.
I just want to jump on something that was just said that's really important. And this is what I do believe we need to focus on, because it is a unique strength of the West. And that is the kill chain and how many pieces it takes to make an effective kill chain. And part of the reason why I think the Ukrainian Air Force was really good in the beginning of the war is because we had some Western intelligence that was feeding them to help them know when to move their kit so that it wouldn't be targeted. And we were thwarting the Russian kill chain. And I think that the important changes in our air forces going into the next 3 generations, to include Ukrainian air forces, I hope, and certainly Polish air forces, is that we are getting ever better, every day better, at feeding all of the intelligence sensors of every kind from the battlefield into that kill chain to make it relevant and timely to be able to strike targets when they're there rather than after they move. And I believe that the Western Air Forces and the kit that we are employing is really going to enable us in an exponential way across the next 5 to 15 years in being able to stitch the kill chain that the General was talking about together and make our aircraft and our weapons ever more lethal because of the ability of those kill chains.
General, thank you. I'm really sorry. We are out of time, and as you know, in the mind room, okay, let's 10 seconds.
I cannot mention because about the air forces, because Ukrainians fall in love with air forces. The legend was created about the Ghost of Kyiv, and I recommend everyone to read about the legendary air pilots who defended Kyiv in the very first months. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. General Breedlove, Solomiia, Bobrovska, Małgorzata, Darowska, General Wiśniewski, join me in the thanking of our panelists for this excellent discussion. And please make sure to go to the Warsaw room as we are going to start the global outlook with the speech of First Lady of Ukraine, Oana Załęska, very, very soon. So please make sure to reserve your seat and join us in the Warsaw room. Thank you very much.